Many African Americans have been misled to believe that we're suffering from a slave syndrome myth, which presents what would be the least plausible method used for controlling generations of people. It's simply not how true brainwashing is achieved. True brainwashing requires a system that is being constantly reapplied and reinforced upon the collective minds of the targeted population in order to remain effective. If not, its effectiveness will lessen with each new generation instead of continuing as we've been witnessing with our people. Furthermore, if we're suffering from a slave syndrome that prevents us from unifying, how then were we able to implement the most successful unified protests in U.S. history during the 1960s? The fact that we're now more divided today than we were during the 1960s is proof that our condition has nothing to do with a slave syndrome. Because if our condition was connected to what happened to us during slavery, its effect would have naturally lessened with each newer generation as we move further away from the era of slavery. This is a logical deduction, but this isn't the case. This isn't what has happened. We've worsened. Not only are we more divided than any previous time in history, we also went from calling ourselves brothers and sisters to now calling ourselves by the N-word and H's. We went from proudly declaring that black is beautiful to many of us now bleaching our skins. Our women changed from proudly wearing afros and cornrows to now millions are ashamed to be seen publicly without wearing their European weaves. Many of our men went from dignifyingly wearing their pants at the waistline to far too many now sagging, exposing their butts. We changed from agreeing that white oppressive forces were our worst enemies to many of us now insisting that we're our worst enemies. We went from being proud of our African heritage to many of us now being so ashamed of it that many of us would accept any frivolous ideology or claim that allows us to claim ourselves being anything other than an African. We went from unanimously knowing that we came from Africa to millions of us now insisting that we're not from Africa. We are in fact more confused today than ever about our identity. We've normalized these changes that has happened within our culture. But there's nothing normal about any of this. This is all by deliberate design. White propagandists have fed lots of false information into our communities in regards to our plight and condition to intentionally create the state of confusion and division that we're currently facing. The ultimate goal is to spread so much disinformation into the black communities until virtually everything believed by the African American population are lies that hinder our liberation. It confuses the black community to such an extent that we're not able to come together to make any sensible conclusions in the interests of liberating ourselves from white oppression. They keep us confused because they know that as long as they keep our understandings flawed, then all of our liberating remedies and strategies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. They don't want us ever gaining an accurate understanding of our plight and condition. This is why they now have millions of us believing so many different falsehoods in regards to our plight and condition. Fortunately, some of us are born with a spiritual immune system that shows us the true reality that others are oblivious to. Throughout generations, our ancestors have always provided us with those they've given the spiritual insight to see through the oppressor's maze of lies and confusion. Those of us bestowed with this gift of spiritual insight must teach. Those who know must teach. African proverb. Here's the truth of our plight and condition. In response to the unprecedented unified black protests of the 1960s, the government deemed the unification of the American Negro as being the greatest threat against the nation's future. That's a direct quote made by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In response to this deemed threat, what was called the U.S. Negro problem, in 1968, white social scientists were hired to thoroughly study the African American population. Their mission was to determine our greatest strength and to then attack it unrelentingly, and to find our most exploitable weakness and then exploit it, greatly exploit it. They determined that our greatest strength was black unity, and that our most exploitable weakness was the fact that we were stripped of our true identity and culture during slavery. First, here's how they now unrelentingly attack black unity. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually a black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralized divide and rule is the method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. It is a well-proven tactic because whenever the oppressed are made self-loathing, they are much more easier to control. This psychological warfare system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects black people to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population without being challenged or counterbalanced by an equal amount of black positive racially affirming information. It conveys a subliminal message that black people are now our own worst enemies, and we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied subliminal programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. This system is the true reason why many black people are now self-loathing, perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history to the contrary. It has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome. The constant black racially demoralizing disinformation also causes many black people to doubt our own ability to govern ourselves and to believe that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. This causes many black people to abandon all hopes of ever liberating ourselves. This is why today most African Americans no longer yearn for black liberation. Most instead now only yearns for a comfortable position within the system of white supremacy. This propaganda campaign also attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. Now, here's how they exploit the fact that we were stripped of our true identity and culture during slavery. Most people believe that the media reflects our reality, but the truth is we most often imitate what we see and hear from the media. A group's identity is shaped by how they see themselves depicted within the media. People often become those media depictions of themselves that have accepted being their reality. Because the white society controls our media images, this allows them to therefore negatively steer our culture. we become those caricatures that we've accepted as being our true identity. It's what's known as media social engineering. Therefore, those who control the people's media images control their culture. Because the white society controls the media images of African Americans, this fact allows white oppressive forces to negatively steer black culture. Because we African Americans were stripped of our true identity and culture during the enslavement of our ancestors, we are therefore more susceptible to negative media social engineering. When these white social engineering scientists and white propagandists create trends and customs for our black youth to imitate, they deliberately create those that gets our black youth acting and dressing as caricatures that reinforces resentment and anti-black prejudicial perceptions. Moreover, those images that reinforces many negative and racist stereotypes about black people. Black youth becomes the caricatures of the derogatory images and stereotypes that they've accepted as being their true reality. The true reason why many African Americans now self-identify by the N-word, glorifies pimps, call women B's and H's, and sags our pants, is because we do not control our media images. Our enemies does. This is not scapegoating. This is the absolute truth. We must learn social science in order to liberate ourselves. One love and peace.